Hey guys, and welcome to Just the Tip, episode 4, and we're going to cover interior detailing. So in this episode, we'll cover an interior detail from start to finish, the way final inspection does an interior detail. So we'll cover dry cleaning, wet extraction, some antimicrobial processes, screens, and polishing timber and things like that. All the tricky little stuff that you've seen us do from time to time, and if you ask questions about, we'll try and make sure everything's in one convenient video for you. Okay. Now I actually begin with all the details such as vents. I use a mixture of low pressure compressed air, about 20 to 40 psi, to blow out any vents. I don't force air down some vents if I think it may damage some components. For some reason I'm worried about vents like these, which are part of the Mercedes-Benz air scarf system. I'm just not confident putting compressed air down there. I'd just rather do it as dry and clean as possible and use vacuuming, pull that debris from the surface rather than push it back down. On normal air conditioning vents, this is not a problem. You can shoot a little bit of compressed air there with a brush and get rid of the dust. Some of that might come back out, so I recommend you run the air conditioning system for a few minutes afterwards. These air scarf vents, that's usually all they need anyway, is a light brush with just a tiny bit of what I use as interior cleanse. Spray it directly on the brush, so wherever you put the brush, that's where the interior cleanse goes. Don't spray the chemical onto the vents because it will go through and down and who knows where that's going. And then I like to give those vents a little wipe. Sometimes I wrap a cloth around a tool of some sort just to get into those crevices. Use whatever crevice tools you have, brushes, anything you have, your little finger, wrap a cloth around your little finger, get it in there, whatever works for your particular little detail on that car, whatever gets that area clean. Now if the car has leather, I then attack the leather. Of course I use leather clean gel and a hand pocket applicator. First I saturate a hand pocket applicator with water, then I wring that out so it's just slightly damp, and I spray the leather clean gel onto that applicator. I then start cleaning the leather. I make sure that I'm not pushing too much chemical down into leather if it's perforated. Don't push the chemical or the water down through the perforations. You just need to clean the leather on top. You don't really need to, just saturate the leather with product. It actually doesn't really do much more. Our product's concentrated too, so try to use a small amount on a very, very lightly damp applicator. Concentrate on stitching. Stitching's where most of the dirt collects. Stitching cleans your clothes and it pulls all the junk off them and holds onto all that stuff. It builds up in that stitching, and then the stitching can be forced loose or break or tear at the seams, or it can cause those bolsters or whatever they're holding together to sag a little. My point is just concentrate on the stitching. The stitching is usually dirtier than the leather itself. For vinyl, I use interior cleanse. But if you have an applicator already loaded with leather clean gel, I use that because why not? It's an efficient way of using what you've already got loaded into the cloth. Now on every surface, always remove the residual. Use a slightly damp interior cloth. Bring that cloth back to a sink and saturate it in water and wring it out until you're sure all the chemical's gone, and bring that cloth back to the surface and then go over that surface again, constantly pulling up that chemical and pulling it off the surface. You use the chemical to clean the surface, but once the chemical's done its job, you want to remove that chemical and take it off the surface. So try to remove all the traces of the chemical that you've applied to the surface. The chemical residual is slightly tacky and that attracts dust. So surfaces that are clean and free of chemical will remain cleaner for longer. There are lots of different materials in the car, and don't forget to attack every single type of material, even gloss or matte plastics, speaker grills, rubbers, etc. They'll be streaky but clean. Now we'll fix those streaks later, don't worry about that, just concentrate on getting those surfaces clean. Rarely, if you have the tools, touch up any sections of glossy timber or cleared carbon, painted trim, etc. with some polish. You can use Cap Heavy. This can really make a difference, especially instrument cluster covers and any gloss black trim. If it has to be masked or removed, do it. Don't risk pushing polish into materials like plastic, rubber, or leather or fabric. But getting those trims up and getting those trims swirl free really makes a difference, just lifts the interior a bit. Especially glossy black trim, if it's all swirled up, it just doesn't look as good. If it's really nice and black and it's good, there's that contrast is back, the interior just looks so much sharper. Now fabric. This is where you want to vacuum. You've loosened all the dust off the other surfaces and it's fallen on the floor, and now you vacuum. If you vacuum first, then you do some of the cleaning, you'll loosen some of the dust, throw it on the floor, and you'll have to vacuum again. You don't really want to vacuum 3 or 4 times. So leave the vacuuming until after you've done all the leather and the dash and all the plastics and vinyls, but just before you've cleaned the fabrics. Now for some stubborn fibres you might have to use a tool. You can buy a whole bunch of different tools, and over the years I've just got to like certain types of tools. I've just, I've got a little bucket full of these little tools that I've collected along the way, and I know which ones have got certain characteristics that I like. And I tend to go to one or two or three little tools for certain types of fabric, short hair or long hair or looped. I know what tool likes to lift dog hair and such from specific types of fabrics. And here's where you'll choose whether or not you're going to use a wet or dry extraction, or some parts you might use dry and some parts you might use wet, which is usually the case for me. I try to avoid wet extraction at all costs. If it needs to be done, you just have to do it, and if I'm doing an interior detail for a customer, it usually has to be done. We want the best result, and wet extraction will get you that best result. But if it can be avoided, it is beneficial not to put too much water or chemical into a surface. Carry out a dry clean in that instance. For instance, this bolster on this SL500, this constantly gets dirty. I have no idea why, but it gets dirty very, very quickly, and the best way to clean it is with dry cleaning. I'm not sure what's underneath it, if there's electronics underneath it. These are active bolsters. They every time you get in the car, they come out, and when you turn a corner, they move. There's a motor or a mechanism behind it, and I don't want to force water in there. Dry cleaning does the job too. So again, just err on the side of caution. You want to try to minimize where you're putting water and how much water you're putting into things. By dry cleaning, I mean you're applying chemical lightly and directly onto the fabric or on the cloth or both, then pulling that cloth along the fabric to break the oils down and allow that cloth to collect the oils. That cloth will start pulling that debris into itself. You then get that cloth and saturate it in water, wring it out, and then return it for duty. You can also use a tool here to agitate the fabrics and spread the chemical around. When you've got all the dirt you're going to collect out of the fabric, apply purity to those fabrics and use a clean cloth to pull the chemical residue into it, leaving behind no chemical and allowing the antimicrobial action of purity to attack any bacteria. Purity will help your fabric dry quicker, and it'll just leave a little bit less odour in the car and just makes it a nicer place to be. This is the same method you'd use for Alcantara or Alcantara, however you want to pronounce it, or micro suede, which is the generic version of that, or any similar kind of fabrics. Just check if you're not sure that the fabric can be cleaned. If it's suede, actual real suede, which I highly doubt you'll have in your vehicle, but if you have real suede, you might not be able to get water onto it. Check with the manufacturer, make sure that you can clean that particular fabric before you attack it. Now, wet extraction, which is commonly referred to incorrectly as steam cleaning, can and should be used for more heavily soiled fabric. Basically, this is completing a drying step and then adding a spray of water followed immediately by a strong vacuum by a machine designed to suck water, a wet extraction machine. The trick here is not to inject too much water at high pressure, and this is a common mistake made by improperly trained detailers. Injected water at high pressure pushes the water, dirt, and the chemical you are going to extract beyond the layer of fabric and into the foam underneath it. The foam is exceptionally difficult to extract water from, and so it'll hold a lot of it. That water in the foam will then grow bacteria, and the cabin will forever have this musty smell, that old car smell to it. And unfortunately, from my experience, no amount of ozone or heated fans or anything will ever solve that issue. It's completely unnecessary to have 100 or more PSI of pressure at the nozzle. 10 PSI is ample. Some machines will produce between 100 and 1000 PSI, some even more than that. Some of these machines are designed to clean houses, and the pressures that are required because the machine has to push that water, sometimes from a truck mount system through tens of meters of hose into an office building or a home. That's also going to a floor tool, and that floor tool's got 2 or 3 nozzles through it. So you really do need that pressure for those applications, but not for cars. Some detailers are using that pressure to carry the solution or the water only a couple of meters from the machine to the car and through a single nozzle in most crevice tools that are designed for car interiors. And I think some of them have the idea that more pressure is better, more pressure will clean away the dirt better, and that's not what's happening, unfortunately. What it's doing is just pushing all that dirt and pushing more water down through the fabric you're trying to clean to the foam underneath, which you're actually not trying to clean. This is your fabric layer, and this is your foam. This is your wet extraction tool, and this is your vacuum. This here is your water, and you want it to just clean this layer here. You definitely don't want this water coming down into the foam. So just, there's no need for high pressure. 10 psi, honestly, is more than enough. One of the last things we do is glass. We use our glass system and almost never use our glass cleaner, which is Optic. The glass system uses 2 cloths in a 2-step system. Step 1 is dark green, step 2 is light green. The first cloth is kind of thicker, has more pile, more of a higher GSM, and the second cloth is thin and has a very aggressive cleaning action. But it's the darker cloth, the step 1 cloth, that we use slightly damp, that actually cleans the glass and pulls all the oils into it, leaving a very clean pane of glass, even though it's damp. The lighter cloth, step 2, we use dry and we wipe over the glass to atomize the water particles. This leaves an immaculate surface that's free of streaks, and you haven't used any chemical here. We found the best way to clean glass is actually to avoid using chemical. The more chemical you put on a glass, the more chemical you have to move around and ask the cloth to suck up. If the cloth is not doing as much work because it doesn't have to hold that chemical as well as all those oils that are on the glass, it usually does a better job of cleaning. So a glass system without our Optic product will work better for lightly soiled glass. Now with that second cloth, don't dry the glass completely. Just go over the glass and break down those water droplets into the microscopic particles, and the water will evaporate without any visible residue, and you'll have that crystal clear finish. No streaks, no smears, no issues. This works great for fingerprints and the humidity that you'll find, as well as general grime. But if the glass hasn't been cleaned in a very long time or it's very dirty, some chemical might be used, in which case you'd apply it to the dark green step 1 cloth. Now our absolute last step after glass is Boost. We use our Boost product as a last step to return those streaky sections to a smear-free glossy finish. We give them a going over with the Paintwork nanofiber, and we treat screens this way. Screens can scratch easily, so use a Paintwork cloth which has a higher GSM and thus is less likely to mark with Boost because it lubricates the surface. That's exactly what Boost is designed to do. Boost also leaves a film behind to help keep those surfaces from fingerprinting and dusting as easily, and they feel slicker and look wetter. It's also matte surface compatible too. I did say Boost was the last step, but actually it's fragrance, and this is optional. We generally ask customers whether they like it or not, and if we're not sure, we'll keep it really subtle, but just spray a couple of puffs of, we like musk, spray musk into the cabin. We spray it into the fabric from a distance of about 30 centimetres, and it just gives us a nice subtle scent to the car, and it makes it feel fresh and nice. Most customers like a little bit of fragrance in the car. And there isn't really a nicer way to drive your car other than when it's just pristine, clean, fresh, and the glass is perfectly clear, crystal clear. It's a much, much nicer feeling. You spend a lot of time inside the car, not outside looking at it. So looking at glossy paintwork is cool, but you spend more time inside the car. So in my opinion, it has to be just as good, if not better, than the outside of the car. It's really important. I hope this has all helped. Any more questions, you let me know. I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you.